Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going over 5 mistakes you guys can fix right now that should help you out in your preparation for Dragon Ball Super Nationals. And I think by the end of the video, it'll probably be more than 5 tips. So hopefully you get your time's worth here. But anyways, we'll go over that. The formatting for this video is a little bit weird because we're coming up on the first weekend of Dragon Ball Super National Tournaments where Fighters Ambition is going to be legal. The past couple European Nationals we've seen did not have Fighters Ambition legal because of shipping issues. So they're pretty much playing Dawn of the Z Legends format, but that's not really a problem, at least for our data, because there are a lot of decks from that meta that are going to be highly relevant going into this coming weekend's Nationals and the Nationals following, right? So we're going to go over a few decks in today's video from Dawn of the Z Legends format that should still be strong in the upcoming National weekend, and we'll talk about their popular strategies and how you can actually deal with them more effectively. Of course, it goes without saying, we'll talk about Sin Shenron and SS4 Gogeta in this video. I do have strategy series videos going over how to counter those decks. I'll link them down in the description so you guys can reference those more readily, but this will kind of compound that and you know, add a little bit on to those videos, as well as talking about some other strategies. So we'll get into that. If you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, you know the deal. Anyways, let's jump right on into the first deck, and we are talking about Sin Shenron. So I know when a lot of you guys play against Sin Shenron, myself included, sometimes they just have the nuts in the opening hand and it's really hard to play against them, but you do have more agency in this matchup than you might initially think, and that's because of how the Z leader works. Sin Shenron is an interesting deck because they're able to be very, very aggressive at a high life total, which is something that was like a big problem with U7 Goku from a few formats ago. It feels like a very unfair thing when players can be very aggressive and not lose cards from hand and not lose life. I do think that's somewhat of an imbalance in the game, but again, like I said, you do have more agency in this matchup than you initially think because of this Z leader. The Sin Shenron deck really ramps up when they get to their Z leader, but they don't have great control over their life. They have to be at 3 or less life in order to Z awaken. If you can prevent that, if you can essentially stall them out, you know, you're gonna basically put a limit on the amount of power they're able to output, right? Because they don't get a 20k double strike leader, they don't get the ability to free play an A drop whenever they want. You can basically kind of tell them when it's okay for them to go into their Z leader. We'll talk about when that's appropriate in a minute. But first, let's talk about how to limit their Z Awaken. So to do that, we have to know the cards they have in their deck that allow them to take life when they want to. Those cards are typically going to be Vegeta Surmounting the Impossible, which is a Z deck battle card, costs 1. They can play it as long as they have 1 Z energy that's not a Dragon Ball, and they can take a life, put a card at the bottom of their deck, draw a card, do all that fun stuff. Then they have Testing the Opposition, which many red decks are playing 3 to 4 copies of. So with those in mind, you have to know the life range your opponent should be at to where they can almost Z awaken themselves. It's still going to require you to attack, but you might attack battle cards, you might attack their unison, and they can still activate copies of Testing the Opposition, right? But what's the magic number? What's the sweet spot? Typically, if you're looking to stall out Sin Shenron, the magic number is typically going to be 6 life. The reason for that is you're putting it on them to, 1, waste an energy in a non-aggressive manner to play Surmounting the Impossible, and 2, you're putting it on them to have 2 copies of Testing the Opposition in hand. So you're making them do all that, jump through all those hoops in order to Z awaken themselves. And if you're playing a slower deck, a mid-range deck, or a control deck, this is a very advantageous strategy for you. This is a skill that's kind of been lost throughout the game's history because in the beginning of the game, when self-awakening wasn't automatic on turn 2 like it is nowadays, you had to actually kind of rely on your opponent to attack you and deal damage in order to get awakened. That's not really a thing now. So when stalling comes up, and not stalling in terms of time rules, stalling in terms of your opponent's life total, when that comes up, it's a skill that's kind of lost on players that are more new to the game. So it is worth going over here that you want to keep Sin Shenron at that sweet spot, that 6 life total, if you're not ready for them to Z awaken yet. Now, when is a good time to kind of allow them to Z awaken? I would say when you have a really big push turn. If you're coming up on like your big turn 4, maybe you're dropping your SCR that turn, or a big turn 5, whatever it is that your deck really turns on and hits the gas, that's going to be a good turn to push your opponent down, your Sin opponent specifically, down in life as fast as you can possibly can. And of course, they'll Z awaken somewhere along that process, but hopefully they're also going to combo a bunch of cards out of their hand. Maybe they've used some super combos aggressively so they don't have them for defense. Maybe you just burn all their super combos in that turn. But whenever you're able to have a big turn, that's when you're going to kind of want to allow them to Z awaken on your own terms. And you can do that in the Sin matchup depending on what type of strategy you're playing. So I wanted to go over that for that matchup. All right, next up we're talking about SS4 Gogeta. A big thing here, you can actually, again, stall their awaken. If you're playing a leader or a deck that does not have to attack their leader, you're going to be in a really good position. And one key example of this matchup is actually SS4 Gogeta versus Sin Shenron. If you played against Red Sin, you know that they can't really attack turn 1 because their leader starts off as a Dragon Ball that can't attack, and they typically can't play an aggressive battle card turn 1. So in that matchup, it's actually a little bit awkward for SS4 Gogeta if Gogeta goes first, because it's going to be a while before they can combo their first Goku or Vegeta to their Z energy, which is part of their awakening requirement, right? So let's give another example here. Let's say I'm playing a standard attack draw 1 leader. Maybe my deck has more aggressive potential that my opponent is aware of, right? So I attack my opponent with my leader. It's a simple 10k. They want to take a damage. They want to start gaining some life. Maybe they don't combo on that attack. Well, now I can punish my Gogeta opponent for not comboing on that attack and just stop attacking them for the rest of the turn. Maybe I let up on some of that aggression to stall their awaken to like turn 3, turn 4, slow their deck down a great deal. That is something you can do. It's going to be very contextual to the games you play and the deck you're playing. But basically, if you can somehow stop them from awakening, that's going to be really good. On the flip side, if you're playing a more defensive deck, you can actually negate key attacks early in the game, which will also prevent them from awakening. A very common play for the Gogeta deck is to play the Unison on turn 2, use the +2 ability, play one of the preparing to brawl battle cards. They'll attack, combo it, and then they'll be able to get awakened from that. If you negate that Unison swing at a key time, you can actually completely mess up the flow of their turn, as well as put a cap on how many cards you're able to draw that turn, because they might have to attack with their unawakened leader to get awakened, and that's going to stunt what, 2 or 3 draws from their turn. Like, that's a really good way to stop SS4 Gogeta's momentum, and it's definitely worth noting. All right, next up, we're talking about the specific boss monster, SS4 Gogeta Triumphant Together. This is a personal strategy of mine. I don't know if other people necessarily agree with this, but my general philosophy when it comes to this matchup is stockpiling my super combos, and of course, as a byproduct, not playing into Broly Crown because you don't want your opponent to pick your super combos out of your hand. But yeah, I stockpile my super combos so that I'm always prepared for the Triumphant Together attack. And as long as you have 2 super combos, all you're really doing is losing 1 card from hand to stop this thing from, dealing 3 damage to you, right? Now, how do you do that kind of successfully? The way I do that is I try to put as much pressure as I can with my battle cards to their leader to try and force a sub-optimal Z Awaken, which is another tip in and of itself. If you can force Gogeta Xeno to Z Awaken at a sub-opportune time, you can win the matchup outright. But besides that, I try to put as much pressure as I can with my battle cards without having to invest super combos. This way I have them defensively, and that's beneficial because whether they play Triumphant Together or they just start swinging with their Z battle cards or their regular battle cards, having your super combos defensively is going to be a really good leverage point for you, right? So I do try to stockpile my super combos defensively in this matchup in preparation for Triumphant Together, but it is also beneficial against their little battle card onslaught. The thing with the game right now is battle cards are getting bigger in power and being able to be played for cheaper costs, so you don't really need to invest super combos into your attacks to put a ton of pressure onto Gogeta, especially now that they've lost Violent Rays as a super generically applicable floodgate. Basically, most of your 20k and 25k attackers are going to be able to put significant pressure on Gogeta. They have, of course, their SS4 Goku Digging Deep, which gives them a pseudo Sensu Beam. They've got other effects that also buff the power of their leader, so in those turns you might have to navigate a little bit differently. But as a general rule, I do like stockpiling my super combos to deal with their aggressive turns and specifically their boss monster. Then we have the SS3 Reboot matchup, which I'm sure many of you are anticipating to be a popular deck come Nats season. This matchup is surely annoying. This can feel like one of the most unfair decks you've ever played against if they get to stabilize. That's the key point. SS3 Goku is designed somewhat well in the sense that it struggles really hard in the early game, especially against an opponent that knows what they are doing. Notice the unawakened side of Goku does not generate card advantage. It actually reduces card advantage in trading that for ramping energy. If you're again playing a deck that doesn't have to attack the unawakened leader of Goku very much, you can put yourself in an advantageous position by not doing that and forcing them to self-awaken. Many SS3 Goku lists are not even playing Awakening Talent Pan anymore because they have access to surmounting the impossible Vegeta in the Z deck, and that is something they can do. But if you leave them at 6 life, they now have to lose a second card from hand in order to get closer to awakening and then use the surmounting to awaken themselves. Now, you might think to yourself, well, who cares? If I attack them or don't attack them, they're still going to just ramp another energy. That doesn't really matter all that much because that energy is coming in rest mode, so it's not even usable for that turn. And you're still reducing their total hand size. At the end of the day, the game is played with the player with more cards and usually having a bigger advantage. So if you can have 2 times the amount of cards in hand that your SS4 Goku opponent has, you're going to be in a really good spot. Trust me, if you can go a few turns without attacking your opponent's leader, if your deck can afford to do so without compromising too much on your own card advantage, this can be a really, really good strategy. Now, the final deck I want to talk about in today's video is Gamma, another deck that I think people are expecting to be pretty popular come Nationals. Now, one thing I want to talk about with this matchup specifically is how to deal with Cell, the ultimate bio android, without having to negate its attacks. If you can do that, you don't really have to suffer the consequences of the auto, which makes you bottom deck a card from your hand. Now, sometimes you got to take the L, you got to bite the bullet, you got to negate the attack and just deal with that consequence, especially if it's a blocker negate. It is quite nice that for that one card, and I guess also the card you're bottom decking as a result of the auto, you are stopping both attacks. So it's like 2 cards for 2 attacks. That's not bad at all. But there are ways that some decks can deal with this card without having to negate, without having to suffer from that auto. In the blue matchup, if you play your Boo Unison, that -1, you always want to save it for the Cell Ultimate Bio Android or potentially their aggressive SCR if they play one. By saving the -1 on your Boo Unison for that card, again, you don't suffer from that auto. If you're playing a yellow deck, SSB Goku of All Defender is a great card because unlike Poutine, you can choose when to use his auto, and you can always just save it for them playing Cell, the Ultimate Bio Android. Maybe the turn goes by and they don't play the Cell, in which case you don't actually use your Goku's auto, but if you deterred them from playing a Cell just by presenting that threat, that's a great trade in my opinion. I think that's really, really good. For red, it's going to be much harder to do this because red is not necessarily a super defensive color anymore. So yeah, if you're playing red, you might have to bite the bullet and just use the testing the opposition, stop the attack, but that's still an okay trade, especially if you're playing Sin or Gogeta where you draw a million cards. But that's what I got for you guys in today's video. I hope that I dropped some knowledge bombs on you guys and was able to help you kind of navigate these kind of intricate gameplay situations. If you have questions, please do drop them in the comments. I'd be glad to answer them. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.